The storm broke before dawn. News channels ran the story on a loop. Meridian Capital faces legal and investor crisis. Board demands emergency session amid lawsuit fallout. In a single night, the company's market value had fallen another 19%. Analysts whispered the word collapse. Inside his penthouse office, Daniel Mercer stood in front of the window, watching the snow whip against the glass. His reflection looked older, pale, drawn, the polished certainty gone. Behind him, the phone rang again. "Sir," Monica's voice trembled, "the board wants you in the main conference room. They've invited Ms. Miles." Daniel froze. "They what?" "She's coming in as Whitmore's consultant representative. They said it's for negotiation." He gripped the edge of his desk. "They think she can save them." There was a long silence on the line. Then Monica whispered, "Can't she?" At 10 a.m., the top floor of Meridian Capital was chaos disguised as formality. Assistants hurried down corridors with folders and coffee trays. Security was tighter than usual. Inside the main conference room, the same one where Ellen had been dismissed months before, the board gathered, faces pale under the fluorescent light. When the door opened, the noise died instantly. Ellen Miles walked in. The room seemed to shrink around her. She wore a charcoal gray suit, hair pinned neatly, expression calm. In her hand, the same silver pen. Daniel stood automatically, the habit of an old hierarchy he hadn't realized still lived in him. Then he caught himself and sat down again, jaw tight. "Ms. Miles," said Chairman Weston, clearing his throat. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. As you're aware, the current circumstances are difficult. Whitmore's involvement presents both risk and opportunity." Ellen nodded once. "I understand." She placed a folder on the table, her movements slow, deliberate. "This is a summary of what Whitmore is prepared to offer," she said. "A licensing resolution, combined with a short-term credit line to stabilize investor confidence. But there are conditions." The board members leaned forward. Daniel's pen froze in his hand. "First," Ellen said, opening the folder, "Meridian must formally acknowledge that the predictive model in question, the MFS sequence, is proprietary technology belonging to me. You will license it through Whitmore Holdings. The rate is non-negotiable." A ripple of unease spread across the room. Daniel spoke first. "That's extortion." Ellen turned her head slowly toward him. "No. That's accounting." She continued, voice steady. "Second, the company must release an internal audit report, full transparency. If you refuse, the SEC will subpoena it anyway. You can do it by choice, or by order." Chairman Weston exhaled, rubbing his temples. "And the third condition?" Ellen closed the folder. "Mr. Mercer resigns immediately." The room fell into stunned silence. Daniel laughed once, sharp, humorless. "You think you can walk in here and dictate?" "I'm not dictating," Ellen said quietly. "I'm offering a way out." She slid a copy of the audit report across the table. "These are the transactions your finance team tried to erase last week. Time-stamped, mirrored, verified by federal compliance. If this goes public, you won't be discussing leadership, you'll be discussing sentencing." Daniel's laughter died. The board shifted uncomfortably. Someone muttered a curse under their breath. Chairman Weston adjusted his glasses. "Ellen, we need to confirm these findings." "Do that," she said. "But do it quickly. The market won't wait for your nostalgia." For the next 20 minutes, voices overlapped, lawyers, executives, directors arguing numbers, timelines, damage control. Ellen didn't raise her voice once. She sat, hands folded, eyes calm, letting them unravel. Finally, Chairman Weston called for quiet. He looked at Daniel. "You've had a good run, Daniel. But if even half of this is true..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Daniel looked around the table. Faces he'd once commanded now stared back coldly. He turned to Ellen, bitterness edging his tone. "You think this is justice?" "No," she said. "This is math." The meeting adjourned at noon. Reporters were waiting in the lobby, cameras flashing as the board filed out. No one spoke. Ellen moved through the noise like a shadow, measured, untouchable. Outside, snow was still falling, soft and relentless. James Pierce was waiting by a black sedan at the curb. He opened the door for her. "How did it go?" he asked. She exhaled slowly, settling into the seat. "Exactly as expected. They're scared enough to listen, but proud enough to stall. Weston will call tonight. And Mercer." Ellen looked out the window as the car pulled away. "He's finished. He just doesn't know what chapter yet." That evening, she sat by the window of her apartment, the city lights shimmering through the frost. Her phone buzzed, a message from Clara. Internal memo leaked. Mercer's resignation expected within 48 hours. "You did it." Ellen typed back. "Not yet. Justice isn't resignation. It's recognition." She set the phone down and stared at the skyline, the towers glowing in the dark, monuments of ego and profit. For years, she had believed numbers were neutral, that data, unlike people, told the truth. Now she understood that even numbers could be weaponized. But tonight, for the first time, the weapon was hers. At 11:30 p.m., her phone rang again. "Unknown number." She answered. "Ms. Miles," said a voice she hadn't heard in months. It was Chairman Weston. "We've accepted Whitmore's proposal. The board voted. Mercer will step down at tomorrow's session. We'll make a public statement by Monday." Ellen was silent for a moment. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she said finally. "Do me one favor, when you read that statement, remember what you said the day you approved my dismissal." "I don't recall," he muttered. "You said experience was expensive." "You were right." She ended the call, turned off the lamp, and let the darkness settle. Below her, the city hummed, restless, alive, full of whispered headlines. And somewhere in a glass office across the river, Daniel Mercer was staring at his own reflection, realizing that the woman he'd once underestimated had just signed the obituary of his career. The snow had stopped by morning, but the city still felt frozen, as if the air itself was waiting to see what would happen next. By noon, every major outlet was running the same headline. Daniel Mercer to step down amid internal investigation. Board to negotiate with former CFO Ellen Miles over settlement terms. Ellen read it while stirring her tea, the quiet hum of a winter afternoon surrounding her. It was almost poetic, the company that had fired her now using her name to calm investors. She closed the article and turned back to her window, where the skyline glittered cold and distant. Then her phone buzzed. "Unknown number." She answered. "Ellen," a familiar voice said, low and tense. "We need to talk." Daniel Mercer. They met that evening at a private hotel lounge overlooking the harbor. The kind of place where power went to lick its wounds, quiet lighting, no cameras, too much whiskey in crystal glasses. He was already there when she arrived, sitting near the fire, tie loosened, face pale beneath the amber glow. For the first time, he looked human, and that, somehow, made him smaller. "Ellen," he said, standing halfway, unsure whether to offer his hand. She didn't take it. She simply sat down across from him, resting her gloves on the table. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the harbor lights flickered. A yacht horn echoed in the distance. Finally, Daniel exhaled. You've made your point. Ellen's eyes lifted slightly. Which one? That you're smarter than all of us. That you built everything we took for granted. Fine. You win. Congratulations. I didn't play, she said. You did. He leaned forward. Look, the board's going to issue a statement tomorrow. They'll pay you a settlement, $2 million upfront, non-disclosure, mutual withdrawal of claims. You walk away clean, we walk away alive. Everyone wins. Ellen tilted her head, studying him like a problem she'd already solved. $2 million, she repeated softly. That's what you think integrity costs? Come on, he snapped. You're not doing this for the money. You want to make a point. I'm giving you that chance. Let's end it before it destroys the company completely. Ellen leaned back. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. I already destroyed it, Daniel. I just did it politely. He swallowed, anger flashing behind his eyes. Do you have any idea what this will do to the employees? To the investors? Yes, she said. I built the system. I know exactly where the shockwaves go. He rubbed his temples. Ellen, please. Don't drag this into court. Don't make this personal. It became personal, she said, the day you used my work to fake your success. A waiter approached, setting down a pot of tea for her and a drink refill for him. Neither spoke until he left. Daniel's tone softened, shifting from arrogance to desperation. Look, I made mistakes. I pushed too hard. I trusted the wrong numbers, the wrong people. But this lawsuit, it'll bury us both. You can't control what the media will do with it. I'll make sure you get everything you want if you just pull it back now. Ellen met his eyes. Everything I want. Yes, he said quickly. The title, the money, the credit. You can even have the algorithm back. Just sign the release, and it's over. She smiled faintly. You really don't hear yourself, do you? He frowned. What? You're still trying to negotiate like you're in control. Like this is a transaction. But this isn't business anymore, Daniel. This is consequence. He clenched his jaw. You think this makes you noble? You're ruining everything we built. She looked at him evenly. No. I'm saving the part that still matters. Silence settled between them again. The fire crackled. The city lights shimmered across the glass walls behind her, reflecting her calm face and his unraveling one. Finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the official licensing agreement between her and Whitmore Holdings. She laid it flat on the table. This, she said, tapping the page, is what you ignored. Every number you ever bragged about came from this algorithm. Every forecast, every investor pitch, every bonus you ever took. You built your empire on something that never belonged to you. Daniel stared at the document, then at her. How could you have known I'd? You didn't read the fine print, she interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. Again. The words hit him harder than any threat. He sank back in his chair, expression hollow. Ellen rose. The board will make their decision tomorrow. Whitmore will proceed regardless. My lawyers will handle the rest. Ellen, he started, but she held up a hand. I'm not your CFO anymore, Daniel. I don't fix your mistakes. She slipped on her gloves, gathered her bag, and turned toward the exit. Before she left, she paused, just long enough to add. You once told me the company needed new blood. You were right. But what you never understood is that experience, real experience, doesn't age. It accumulates. Then she walked out. Outside, the night air was sharp and clean. The snow had begun again, light, almost invisible, falling over the harbor. Ellen stood beneath the awning, watching the flakes swirl in the streetlight. Her phone buzzed. A message from James Pierce. Whitmore just confirmed acquisition interest. Meridian stock down another 14%. You've won. Ellen typed back. No. I reminded them who wrote the rules. She slipped the phone away, looked out at the dark water, and whispered to herself, not with triumph, but with quiet finality. Respect isn't written in contracts. But losing it always costs. The courtroom was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Rows of journalists filled the benches, their pens poised, cameras blinking like small, impatient eyes. At the front, two names glowed on the docket in black letters. Ellen Miles versus Meridian Capital Holdings. Ellen sat at the plaintiff's table beside James Pierce, calm, composed, a gray silk suit and the same silver pen resting before her like a ritual. Across the aisle, Daniel Mercer stared at the table, jaw tight, eyes bloodshot. The arrogance that once animated him had burned out, leaving only exhaustion and disbelief. The judge entered, a firm voice cutting through the static. Court is now in session. The murmurs died. James rose first. Your Honor, what we present today is simple, ownership and deception. Meridian Capital knowingly used proprietary technology belonging to my client, Ms. Ellen Miles, while falsifying financial data to mislead investors. The evidence, he lifted a binder, is indisputable. He laid the contract before the bench. The same document Ellen had signed 15 years earlier, its edges worn, ink faded but alive. The judge adjusted his glasses. This is the original. Yes, Your Honor. Witnessed, filed, and unaltered. The defense attorney, young and flustered, stood. Your Honor, this clause is archaic. It doesn't apply to corporate property developed under employment. James gestured to the projection screen behind him. Then explain this. The lights dimmed. On the screen appeared a line of code, bold, elegant, signed at the bottom. Copyright E. Miles, proprietary sequence. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. This code still exists in Meridian's current system? James nodded. Verified by independent forensics last week. The judge's gaze shifted to Daniel. Mr. Mercer, did you know your company was using unlicensed software? Daniel's lips parted, but no words came. His lawyer intervened, stumbling through excuses, oversight, delegation, inherited systems. Each word made the silence heavier. When Ellen took the stand, the room stilled again. She placed her hand on the oath Bible, her voice steady as she swore to tell the truth. James asked softly, Ms. Miles, could you describe what this algorithm meant to Meridian? It was the spine, she said. The predictive model that allowed every financial forecast, every client portfolio, every risk assessment to exist. Without it, Meridian is data without structure. A body without blood. And when you left the company, did you ever transfer ownership? No. Did anyone ask you to? No. She looked directly at Daniel as she said it, and for the first time, he looked away. By midday, the evidence was undeniable. Emails. Financial logs. Audit trails. Every page a thread that led back to the same truth. Ellen had built the machine that Daniel had stolen. The defense grew desperate. They attacked motive, age, relevance. They said she was bitter. They said she wanted revenge. But when she was called to the stand again, she ended it with a single sentence. Revenge is loud. What I did was quiet. The courtroom fell still again. Even the judge seemed to pause before speaking. That afternoon, when the verdict came, the air seemed to hold its breath. In the case of Miles versus Meridian Capital, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The judge's words echoed like a bell. All proprietary rights to the predictive model are hereby restored to Ms. Ellen Miles. Meridian Capital is ordered to cease all use of said technology immediately and pay damages in the amount of $48 million. A murmur swelled across the room, a rising, unstoppable wave of sound. Reporters scrambled to capture it. Daniel sat motionless, staring at nothing. Ellen exhaled once, slow, measured, as if releasing 15 years of withheld breath. The judge continued, "This ruling is final." Gavel down. Silence. Outside, the world had already changed. By the time Ellen left the courthouse, stock tickers were flashing in red. Meridian Capital down 27% in first hour. CEO Mercer expected to resign. Whitmore Holdings rises 14%. The crowd outside parted as she stepped into the cold air, flashes bursting around her like lightning. "Ms. Miles. How does it feel to win? Do you plan to return to Meridian? What will you do next?" She didn't answer. She just smiled faintly, lifted her coat collar against the wind, and kept walking. James caught up beside her. "It's over," he said, almost incredulous. Ellen shook her head. "It's corrected." They stopped near the courthouse steps, watching as TV crews swarmed the entrance. "Do you regret it?" James asked quietly. Ellen looked out toward the skyline, the towers of glass where she had once spent her life, the same towers now trembling under their own weight. "No," she said. "I regret trusting people who never read the terms." That evening, Daniel Mercer held a press conference. His voice, once confident, was hollow. He announced his resignation effective immediately. The camera captured him as he tried to speak, but every apology sounded like a plea. Ellen watched from her apartment, sound muted, city lights flickering across her face. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply closed her laptop, turned off the lamp, and let the quiet fill the room. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, slow, endless. Later that night, Clara messaged her. "Meridian servers shutting down. Your system went offline at 8:47 p.m. It's officially over." Ellen typed back. "Good. Systems fail. People learn." She set the phone down, stood by the window, and watched the snow swirl through the city lights. The empire that had erased her name was gone. But her creation, her idea, would live on, under her terms, her name, her legacy. In the reflection of the glass, she saw herself not as the woman they fired, but as the architect they had forgotten to credit. The one they underestimated. The one who outlasted them all. And as the city settled into silence, Ellen whispered to the night. "Justice doesn't shout. It endures." The morning sky over Boston was pale gold, the kind of light that comes after a long storm. Snow clung to the curbs, melting in slow rivulets that glimmered against the street. Ellen Miles stood on the sidewalk across from the building she had once called hers. Meridian Tower. 40 floors of glass and ambition. The place where she had been dismissed, humiliated, forgotten. And now, owned. A discreet black sedan pulled up beside her. Stephen Hayes from Whitmore Holdings stepped out, brushing frost from his coat. "Good morning, Ms. Miles," he said, smiling with the quiet awe of a man who knew he was standing beside history. "Congratulations. The acquisition went through at midnight. Whitmore officially controls 61% of Meridian Capital." Ellen didn't look at him. Her gaze remained on the building, its mirrored facade reflecting the winter sun. "Did they keep the name?" "For now," he said. "Until the board decides otherwise." She nodded. Let's not rush it. Let the walls remember who they belong to before they're repainted. They entered through the revolving doors. Everything inside was almost unchanged, the same marble floors, the same scent of cedar polish and expensive coffee. Employees looked up from their desks as she passed. Recognition dawned like shock, whispers trailing in her wake. Is that her? I thought she retired. She's with Whitmore now. Ellen walked as though she didn't hear them. Each step echoed through the vast lobby, soft, deliberate, the rhythm of memory turned to purpose. When the elevator doors opened, Stephen gestured. The board's waiting upstairs. They've been nervous. Good, she said. It means they're paying attention. The ride up was silent except for the faint hum of machinery. Ellen watched the floors tick upward, 20, 30, 35, remembering the countless times she'd stood in that same elevator, carrying forecasts, presentations, entire futures that no one had truly seen. Now, she carried nothing. And yet, she carried everything. When the doors slid open on the top floor, the corridor outside the executive suite looked smaller than she remembered. Daniel Mercer's nameplate was gone. The glass wall behind it was bare, leaving only a faint rectangle of clean space, a ghost where authority used to live. Inside the boardroom, the directors rose as she entered. Even Chairman Weston stood, a reflex of instinct, not respect. Ms. Miles, he began, voice thin, on behalf of the board, we'd like to. Ellen raised a hand, stopping him with a gesture both polite and final. There's no need for speeches, she said. We all understand why I'm here. She placed her gloves on the table, looked around at the faces, the same faces that had once nodded in silence when Daniel told her she was too old to lead. Now they waited for her to speak, afraid to interrupt. Meridian will remain operational, she continued. No layoffs. No scapegoats. The company will rebrand under Whitmore's oversight. You will maintain your positions, if you're willing to adapt to transparency. Someone at the end of the table shifted uneasily. And if we're not? Ellen smiled faintly. Then you'll find the door faster than I did. A nervous laugh rippled across the room, short-lived, hollow. Chairman Weston cleared his throat. Ms. Miles, we owe you an apology. She looked at him, eyes steady. No, she said softly. You owe the truth an apology. I was just its messenger. Silence followed. In that silence, the weight of her words settled like snow. She gathered her gloves again, ready to leave. At the door, she paused, glancing back once more at the long glass table, the skyline glittering behind it. This company was built on numbers, she said. But it fell because no one cared to read what those numbers meant. Don't repeat that mistake. Then she walked out, the door closing behind her with the soft sound of closure. Outside the boardroom, she found herself standing before the large window at the end of the corridor, the one overlooking the harbor. For a moment, she stood in silence, watching the slow movement of ships through the icy water. The same views she used to see every evening after late meetings. Only now, the horizon belonged to her. Stephen approached quietly. That was remarkable, he said. How does it feel to be back? Ellen smiled without turning. Familiar. But lighter. He hesitated. What happens next? She looked out over the water. We rebuild. With different math. He frowned. Different math? Math that includes people, she said. Not just profits. As they left the building, employees stood near the lobby windows, pretending to check their phones but really just watching her go. Some smiled, some whispered. A few even clapped softly as she passed. No applause, no fanfare, just quiet acknowledgement. Outside, the cold wind met her again. Across the street, the city stretched wide and endless, a map of every decision she had ever made. Her car waited, engine running, but she didn't get in yet. She looked back once more at Meridian Tower. The glass reflected the morning sun, blinding for a moment, then fading into gold. For years, she had walked away from that reflection feeling smaller. Today, she saw something else, not revenge, not triumph, balance. She whispered to herself, almost a prayer. You don't rebuild an empire. You rebuild yourself, and the empire follows. Then she stepped into the car, closed the door, and disappeared into the brightness of a new beginning. The snow had melted overnight. Boston glistened beneath a thin layer of mist, the streets damp and silver. Inside Meridian Tower, a meeting room waited, air still, blinds half drawn, the city skyline looming beyond the glass like an audience of ghosts. Ellen Miles stood by the window, hands resting lightly on the back of the chair at the head of the table. The same chair she had once been told she didn't belong in. Now, it waited for her. The board members filed in quietly, their voices low, cautious. Some avoided her gaze, others watched her with a mix of guilt and awe. When they had all taken their seats, she turned. "Good morning," she said. No one replied. The silence was not disrespectful, it was reverent, uneasy. Stephen Hayes, representing Whitmore Holdings, stood near the far end of the room, tablet in hand. "The acquisition transition is complete," he announced. Effective today, Meridian operates as a subsidiary of Whitmore Financial Group. All previous leadership changes have been filed and approved by the SEC. He paused, glanced toward Ellen. "Ms. Miles will oversee strategic operations during the interim period." A murmur rippled across the table. One director, a gray-haired man in a navy suit, raised his hand timidly. "So you're taking over?" Ellen regarded him evenly. "No. I'm cleaning up." The answer silenced him. She moved to the front of the room, her steps soft but deliberate. "I asked for this meeting for one reason," she said. "Not to discuss lawsuits or headlines, but to discuss what happens next. Because this," she gestured toward the window, the glittering skyline, "isn't victory. It's aftermath." Her words hung in the air like static. "You all know what went wrong," she continued. "Numbers became armor. Ethics became optional. You stopped asking what success cost." Someone shifted in their seat. Another looked down at their notes. Ellen placed both hands on the table. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried the weight of command. "You can't rebuild trust with press releases. You rebuild it by remembering why people believed in you in the first place." Stephen cleared his throat. "We've prepared a plan for restructuring. New oversight protocols, transparency measures." Ellen held up a hand. "Not yet." Her eyes swept the table. "Before we put numbers back on paper, we need to talk about long-term stability." The phrase landed softly, but its echo filled the room. No one dared interrupt. She continued, slower now, her tone almost reflective. "When I was here years ago, I believed stability came from control, from knowing every detail, every equation, every projection. I was wrong. Stability doesn't come from control. It comes from consistency in values." She paused. The light shifted across the table, turning her hair silver in the sun. "You don't protect a company by winning quarters. You protect it by telling the truth when it's inconvenient. That's how you keep the numbers honest. That's how you keep people loyal." Her gaze moved from one face to another. "That's what you forgot." A long silence followed. The kind that says everything words can't. Finally, Chairman Weston spoke, voice low. "Ellen, none of us expected you to come back. And certainly not like this. I can't change the past. But if you're willing, we'd like you to guide us through this recovery. Ellen studied him for a moment, the same man who had once signed the paper that ended her career. She didn't smile. She simply nodded. I'll help you rebuild. But not for you. For the people downstairs who still believe this company means something. Weston lowered his eyes. Understood. Outside the boardroom, the wind picked up, brushing against the glass walls. The city hummed faintly beneath them, trains, traffic, life moving forward as if nothing had happened. But inside, the air felt sacred, suspended. Ellen looked out at the skyline again. You've all seen what happens when numbers replace principles, she said. So here's my proposal. She turned back to them. From today, every decision that affects this company must answer 3 questions. Does it create value? Does it maintain integrity? And would you be proud to sign your name under it? No one spoke. Finally, one of the younger directors whispered, and if the answer's no? Ellen's eyes softened, not cruel, but clear. Then you walk away before I have to make you. The silence that followed wasn't fear. It was respect. The kind that only truth commands. The meeting adjourned an hour later. Papers shuffled, chairs scraped, footsteps faded. One by one, the board members left the room, quieter, smaller than when they'd entered. When the door finally closed, Ellen remained by the window. Below, employees crossed the lobby, oblivious to the quiet revolution unfolding above them. Stephen stepped forward. You were extraordinary, he said quietly. They'll remember today. Ellen shook her head. They'll forget. People always do. That's why I write things down. He smiled faintly. Then what do we write next? Ellen looked at him, her expression softening. The truth, she said. And this time, we don't let anyone edit it. Later that afternoon, she walked through the lobby one last time. Sunlight streamed through the glass, painting golden shapes across the floor. Employees glanced up as she passed, some nodded, some whispered, some smiled. A few didn't recognize her at all. And that, somehow, made her smile. At the door, she paused, looking back at the emblem on the wall, Meridian Capital, its letters faintly tarnished but still standing. For a moment, she simply watched them shimmer in the light. Then she whispered, almost to herself. Let's talk about long-term stability. And with that, she stepped outside, into the noise, the wind, and the quiet satisfaction of balance restored. The morning light was soft, the kind that blurs edges, that turns glass into mirrors and snow into gold. From her office high above the harbor, Ellen Miles could see the entire city of Boston waking beneath her. Ships moved slowly through the water. Steam rose from rooftops. The world, for once, looked quiet. On her desk sat 3 things. The 2008 contract, yellowed but intact. The silver pen, its ink nearly gone. And a single envelope marked, Final Settlement, Meridian Capital. She hadn't opened it yet. She didn't need to. She already knew what it said, final payments processed, licensing rights transferred, damages paid in full. Legally, her story was complete. But stories, she had learned, don't end with signatures. They end when the noise stops. And now, there was only silence. The door opened behind her. Stephen Hayes stepped in, holding a folder. They've released the press statement, he said. Meridian's rebranding will begin next quarter. You'll be listed as Senior Strategic Advisor for the transition. Ellen turned slightly, smiling faintly. Advisor. That's what they call ghosts when they start listening to them again. Stephen chuckled softly. You've done it, Ellen. You won. The lawsuit, the redemption, all of it. Ellen looked back at the harbor. Winning and restoring aren't the same thing. He frowned. You don't sound happy. I'm content, she said. Happiness is for beginnings. Contentment is for endings. Stephen placed the folder on her desk. They also want you to speak at the press conference next week. The media's calling you the woman who outlasted Wall Street. Ellen raised an eyebrow. They always need a headline. Just make sure they spell my name right this time. He smiled, then hesitated. If you don't mind me asking, what will you do now? Ellen leaned back, eyes distant. What I've always done. Read the fine print. He looked puzzled. She added, not in contracts. In people. He laughed quietly, nodded, and left her alone. The silence returned, the soft hum of the city below, the ticking of her watch. Ellen sat for a long time, thinking of the years that had passed between one signature and another. She remembered the young woman she once was, staying late at her desk, believing merit was armor, that truth always rose to the top if she worked hard enough. She remembered the day they told her she was too old to lead. The day she walked out without anger, only calculation. The night she found the clause they forgot. And then the courtroom. The board. The silence that followed every victory not shouted, but earned. She smiled. They never understood, she whispered. The fine print isn't just in paper. It's in people. The details no one pays attention to, that's where truth hides. At noon, she left her office for the last time. Her footsteps echoed softly through the hall, past glass walls and polished floors that had seen her rise, fall, and return. In the lobby, the receptionist, new, young, unaware of history, smiled politely. Good afternoon, Ms. Miles. Ellen returned the smile. It's a beautiful day to finish something. She stepped outside. The air was cold, but bright. The wind carried the scent of salt and winter. Across the street, photographers waited, but she didn't stop for them. She simply walked, coat buttoned, posture straight, eyes calm, through the city that had once chewed her up and now whispered her name with reverence. Each step was steady. Measured. Free. At the corner, she stopped to watch a group of interns hurry into the building, laughter, coffee cups, laptops clutched in gloved hands. One of them held the door for another, the way she used to. For a brief moment, she saw herself among them, younger, eager, untested, and felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. Then she turned and kept walking. A block away, the city opened up into the harbor walk, that long stretch of pavement where water met glass, where wind always carried the sound of something new beginning. Ellen stood there for a while, the skyline reflecting in her eyes. She thought about everything she'd lost. Everything she'd gained. And everything she'd learned that no victory could buy back: dignity, patience, the quiet strength of those who wait. She whispered, justice doesn't roar. It lingers. Her phone buzzed, a message from Claire and Gwyn, the young analyst who had helped her mirror the database months ago. They just trained us on the new system. It's cleaner, fairer, and it works. You changed more than you think. Ellen smiled, typing back. Then it was worth it. She slipped the phone into her pocket and looked toward the horizon, the line where water met sky, where endings blended into beginnings. For a moment, she stood completely still. Then she reached into her bag and took out the old 2008 contract. The paper fluttered in the wind, edges frayed, ink faded, her signature still bold. She tore it cleanly down the center. Half fell into the harbor, half she kept. It wasn't vengeance. It was closure. The wind carried her hair across her face as she whispered to the water. Respect isn't written in contracts. But losing it always costs. She turned away, walking into the sunlight, her reflection flickering in the glass building she had once built for others. Now, they mirrored her, clear, unbroken, whole. The story of Ellen Miles ended not with applause, not with headlines, but with the quiet certainty that the world remembers those who keep their word, and the claws they never forget again.